And when we did our first release, woke up the next morning, got on the system. I'm like, oh my God, 100 people downloaded the app and signed up, right? And we were high-fiving and, super excited. Like, oh my, it actually worked. That, actually managed to get 100 people on the first day to download the app and sign up. That excitement lasted all of 10 minutes. Okay, honest to God. Because then we both, almost at the same instant, sat there and were like, oh shit, these 100 people believed in the promise that we communicated to them. And now we have the responsibility or the burden to deliver on that promise.
Hello folks, welcome to My First Business. I'm Naeem Pervez, and this podcast is for entrepreneurs, young or old, who are looking to improve the way that they look after their business. Each episode is designed to be like a conversation with a mentor that you never had, and you'll find inspiration, guiding principles, and possibly some solutions to your current business problems. We talk about the lows, like wanting to shut it all down, and we talk about the highs, like starting your second or your third or your fourth successful business, and also everything in between. My guest for today is Mazen Omair. I can't believe I don't have more people like him in my life. Mazen completely broke me in a very good way, as you'll hear through the conversation. So, who is Mazen? Mazen Omair is a CEO and co-founder of Eduployment, which is a purpose-driven technology business that's out there reimagining the way blue-collar recruitment works. They focus on upskilling blue-collar workers with English language skills and also provide them better access to jobs. Mazen is also the co-founder of Omair Trading, which owns the sub-franchise rights for Subway restaurants here in the UAE. And he's also the co-founder of Sugarfield Co, which is the region's favorite candy store. Mazen's story has taken many terms, from his humble beginnings in his grandfather's store, discussing and arguing pricing strategy with his grandfather when he was 8 years old, to selling Polaroid pictures to pilgrims in Medina, to then becoming an entrepreneur by necessity when the job market was in shambles, and then eventually to leading this social impact business. Honestly, it'll be really hard to summarize my wide-ranging and mind-opening conversation with Mazen, but here are some highlights. Mazen and I talked about an event that he attended where he almost collapsed and got the inspiration to start his social impact business. We talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly of franchise businesses. We discussed the risks of parallel entrepreneurship or having multiple businesses at once. We spoke about running a business with your spouse, which, as you know, I have a personal interest in. We spoke about launching a minimum viable product and him waking up to see 100 downloads of his app on the launch day and how that made him feel. We talked about the stories we tell ourselves about financial stability and when we'll get there. He shed some light on some dangers that entrepreneurs face, especially those that haven't had a job before or any corporate experience before. Overall, there are two things that really stood out to me as my takeaways from this conversation. Number one, understand your own values very well and live your life according to those values with high integrity. And number two, don't live your life on hold. What if the time to pursue your dreams never actually comes? If this is the first episode of My First Business that you're listening to, then you have picked well, my friend. And if you're coming back after hearing other episodes, you're not going to be disappointed. I loved the wisdom of Mazen, and I think you will too. So without much further ado, here's Mazen Omair on the EO series of the My First Business podcast. This episode is brought to you by the Entrepreneurs Organization. Now, before I tell you what they do, first, let me tell you the numbers behind Entrepreneurs Organization, or EO for short. So they started in 1987. They've currently got 17,000 influential business owners as their members, spread across 213 chapters in 60 plus countries worldwide. They've been in the UAE since 1997 and have 119 members here, with a median member sales of roughly $4 million. And altogether, the total number of people employed by their members is over 23,000. And they've got members from all sorts of industries, including technology, healthcare, oil and gas, real estate, hospitality, jewelry, communications, logistics, travel. I could really go on. Mind blown yet? Now, here's what EO is actually all about. Here's what you get for being a member of EO, or here's what they do for you. EO in UAE provides an effective platform for networking, education, and support for business owners. The entrepreneurial journey can be lonely, and I can attest to that. And with an economy that changes on a dime, it can be hard to know what your next move should be. And that's where EO comes in with their support. One of the key benefits of membership is access to a robust calendar of events, including workshops, social events, and learning opportunities. So you get a ton of networking opportunities as well as a chance to learn from experts in your own field. EO also offers a mentorship program, so they pair you up with experienced business leaders who can offer guidance and support as you grow your own business. So for me, I've personally or vicariously benefited a lot from being in the EO network through their accelerator program, of which my partner is a part of. And if you're a business owner tired of taking on your challenges all alone and are looking for unique networking opportunities, along with structured support through accountability groups and mentors, well, you can either start a podcast like I did, or if you don't want to do that, I highly encourage you to apply to EO. I'll leave a link for you in the show notes. And if you're not fully convinced yet, I'll be bringing on business owners on this podcast that are currently members of EO, including today's guest, so you can get a sneak peek of what you're getting. Mazen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I want to start teasing out all your business wisdom, put it in a jar and keep it for myself and not share it with anyone. But okay. I do want to get one thing out of the way first, though.
All right.
Something a little birdie told me. I want to know if it's true or not.
Okay.
Is it true that you once won a free rubber boat, yet you still paid $250 for shipping and handling, only to find out that it was rather substandard?
Yeah. Was that on Google?
I have my ways.
I need to know your source for that one.
Can't share
Absolutely
my
true. Absolutely
what
true.
What happened? Tell me.
I think I've, wow, man, now you're taking me back some years. I think I was always fascinated with boats. Always wanted to have a boat. I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. Can't remember where I was in my life, but somewhere probably in university, and got one of these promos in the mail. You know, the U.S. you'd get all this junk mail, and I was like, "Hey, congratulations! You won this boat, and it's got an engine and blah blah blah." And it was $250 for shipping. It was free, but the shipping was $250. So I was like, "Oh wow, that's got to be a big boat, you know, $250 to ship this thing, you know." And I was like, "Wow." I'm like, yeah, I'm getting a boat. And, you know, I was dabbling with fishing or something at the time. And so, you know, sent in my payment details and waited, I don't know, probably 6 to 8 weeks. And a box showed up and it was probably about this big, right? I was like, what? And yeah, it was a, I actually got something. So I can't say it was a scam.
Well, that's the funny thing, right? It wasn't
a scam.
Like you still got something out of it.
I got something.
What did you do with it?
Nothing. I went into the basement. I opened this box and I'm like, if I sit in this boat, it's going to sink. It's not going to float. It was,
and you didn't even have kids at the point?
No, nothing. I was single at the time. And the engine was like, maybe like not even a blender's engine. I mean, it was something really, really ridiculous. I'm like, all right, I've been scammed. So, okay, big lessons learned.
Have you won anything since?
You know, I have never been one of these people that, you know, you would say is like lucky in draws and raffles and whatever. I think somewhere way back, we're walking out of Carrefour here, I think at Mall of the Emirates, and somebody stopped me and said, you won a prize, and it was whatever was in your trolley was free. And I was like, oh, wow, this is okay, cool, thank you, appreciate it, free groceries.
Oh, man.
But that's about it. I mean, in terms of like these kind of random things, aside from like pitch competitions and things like that, where you're actually doing something to earn it, but these random things, no.
Yeah, I remember winning.
I'm dying to find out how you got that tidbit. That's not something I normally bring up, but that's I'm going to twist your arm afterwards to find out.
That's part of the art.
Okay,
the magician
cool.
Doesn't share.
Yeah, that's admirable research.
Well, I want to talk about money, but just not a lot. Just maybe for this question, and I think money is often the most talked about, the least understood of subjects. Whatever it is, it can't be ignored. So I remember also reading somewhere that when you were transitioning from your corporate life to your business life, there were a few months where you had some potentially financial insecurities about, is this going to work? And it was a bit of a strain on you. I want to ask how, from that time to today, and we'll weave in a few stories in between that, but how from that time has your relationship with money evolved? If it has. The
short answer, it has not. And I think that was an understatement, what you said, right? So it was not a few months, it was 2 to 3 years. First 2-3 years of the journey, what I sometimes refer to as my entrepreneurship 2.0 journey, were extremely rough. And it was extremely living on the edge.
What was at stake at that time?
Without any exaggeration, literally everything. Right. So, I mean, just to put it in context. So, and this might come up later in our conversation, but shortly before that transition, I had that was during the time when this was 2008-9, just pre-economic crisis kicking in, and Dubai was going through its massive real estate boom, right? And everybody was flipping real estate and buying things off plan and flipping it within a quarter and making 10% and all this stuff. So actually my team at the company where I was working at, the team that reported to me, they were making more money than I was, and I was the senior exec, right? Because I was traveling around, building the business, and they were sitting in Dubai flipping real estate, right? So I said, okay, let's do something, right? And the only asset we had was our house here, which we had on mortgage, but the property value had gone up with that wave. And I said, okay, let's take out a second mortgage and take that capital, invest it in rental properties, flip real estate like everybody else is doing. Something for the kids. So we did that. And then we got the check from, at the time, Amlak Finance, the equity release check for that second mortgage. And that was the third to last check they wrote before shutting down with the economic crisis, right? So I had this chunk of borrowed capital that was deposited in the bank. I had tripled my mortgage by taking that second mortgage. My mortgage payment tripled in its amount. And then the company that I was working in collapsed, okay? And so basically I knew I'm going to be out of a job. Very complicated set of circumstances there.
Yeah.
That's a whole other story. One day I'll write a book about it. But it was basically, I knew I'm dead man walking. So I had 7,000 people reporting to me, a massive company, multi-billion dollars that we had scaled up here in Dubai. And this company collapsed. And so I had this borrowed capital, triple the mortgage, no job.
You still have to pay back the mortgage now that
you have to pay it back. So the borrowed capital now, instead of being investment capital, becomes survival capital, and you're servicing the debt. And then what do you do with it? Can't invest in real estate because real estate was crashing every night. So that's how this journey started, right?
So almost like an entrepreneur by necessity.
That's exactly my words. Maybe I say that, there's always this kind of like romanticized version of entrepreneurship that one day you wake up and you say, forget the corporate world, I'm going to jump out and do my own thing. That wasn't my case, right? I mean, my case was entrepreneurship by necessity, right? Okay, survival. What can I do? Nobody was willing to hire. Economic crisis was in full swing at that point, and profile was too senior. There's not that many privately held multi-billion-dollar companies that are not family-run in the region. So, those positions are few and far in between. Recruiters were saying, sorry, your CV is too scary. We can't get you anything. And so the opportunity came around to do that. And then to jump in with the first business, which we did. But then, like I said, the first couple of years, 2 to 3 years, were rough because it was invest, build. But, it takes a while for a business to grow. And in those few years, the financial aspect was not happening fast enough, right? So I was mentally looking at this graph of, the capital declining as income starts coming up, and there's an intersection point. And if that didn't happen, I think we were within 45 days of that intersection point. That if that didn't happen, the income didn't come up to that level where that's it, done.
Could you tell us what that business was? Like, 2 questions actually. What that business was, and secondly, I know you said like it's entrepreneurship by necessity, but was there a seed planted within you beforehand in your corporate careers? I mean, I'm not sure about these. I've done my research, but I didn't do a well enough job.
Yeah.
But do you come from like a family business background? Has there always been business in your life, or was this the first time you thought I'm going to do something of my own?
No, it was not the first time. And I think I've actually done a lot of reflections over the recent years around that, because I actually struggled with people introducing me as an entrepreneur, right? And so there was a bit of that imposter syndrome going, really, sell sandwiches. I mean, it's, but yeah, tracing it back when I started looking at it, actually, it goes back, and I did my first startup. So Entrepreneurship 1.0 was my first tech startup back in the US when I was 19, and I was going through my first master's degree. So that was my first kind of venturing out into the entrepreneurship space. But if I trace it back, I would have to say my first exposure to entrepreneurship was through my maternal grandfather, who basically, if you were to take his life story and couch it in today's lingo, right? He was, quite progressive and whatever for a gentleman born and raised in Mecca, where most people made their living via trade to the pilgrims, right? And so somehow in the 50s, 60s, he ventured out to Sweden and got the agency for a couple of Swedish brands one was like sewing machines, and another one was these kind of like campsite stove type things, which the pilgrims would use, during the pilgrimage, and became household brands at the time. So he had a shop in Mecca, and then he expanded to Jeddah and opened up a couple of shops. And so as a very young a young boy, we lived in Riyadh, and whenever we'd go back to Jeddah for school holidays and things like that, while my cousins were all playing, what I loved to do was wake up and go down to the shops with my grandfather, right? And, whatever I was, 6, 7, 8 years old, sitting there at the cash register, so to speak, the drawer, writing the invoices, doing the math. And I loved that. And I would actually sit there and argue with him. You can imagine.
At 8 years old.
At 8 years old, argue with him about his pricing strategy, right? Because I would work the floor, right? So the ladies would come in. It became like a household shop, right? He'd had knickknacks and different things. And they'd come in and they'd like, oh, how much is this little marble lion head bookend or something? I remember that one distinctly.
I know, that was pretty specific.
That was very distinct, right? Because the whole family had them because you couldn't sell them, right? So they ended up in everybody's house, right? And I would argue with them, and I'd say, why are you selling it for 35 riyals? Okay, the ladies come in, they like them, they want to buy them, but they think they're too expensive. Why don't you sell them for 20? And he's like, no, you have to make margin. You have to make a profit. I'm like, yes, but if you sell it at 20, you'd sell more, right? And so you'd make less per piece, but overall you'd make more money. And he was a very stubborn man with a tremendous level of grit. And so I think, those exposures were there. Those seeds were planted from a very early on. My first, I think, money that I made as an entrepreneur, again, it's fascinating sometimes when you look back at your life, was when I did the pilgrimage, Hajj. And for the first day of Eid, at the end of it, some relative had given me a Polaroid camera as an Eid present. And they had just come out. This was like the first generation of Polaroids. And we're in an area called Medina, which is like where the pilgrims stay at the end. And so for whatever reason, I got out of the little house we were staying in and started climbing up the mountain where all the pilgrims were basically camped out. And I would go to each pilgrim and say, Haji Surah, picture, because they want to commemorate being at the pilgrimage. So I sold the picture for 5 riyals a picture until I ran out of film.
Wow.
So that was the first money I made as a hustler, trader, entrepreneur, whatever you want to call it.
What'd you do with that money?
Can't remember. I think I tried to buy more film, but the Hajj was over.
More invested inventory. Back in the business, not candies.
Yeah. So no, not candies. So yeah, the seeds have been, I think, there, but life takes you down different paths.
And the first business was related to food.
First business, to bring it back, was related to food, right? And so that was, again...
Let's say first registered proper business.
Right, first proper business, in this 2.0 journey was food, which just came through a networking. I was desperately looking for a job, networking with a friend, and asked him around, if he knows people, and he... we're very close, but you don't normally discuss your finances with your friends, right? And so then he eventually said, okay, well, what's your package? What are you looking for? And I told him, and he started laughing. And I was very insulted, right? I was like, what are what are you laughing at? I'm a big boy, I'm running this $2 billion a year business, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, all this that you're doing for that, open up a couple of Subways and you might make more money. And being a corporate snob, 20 plus years in the corporate world, is like, you can't, I'm a tech guy, I'm a business guy. You can't make money selling sandwiches. And so then he started showing me some numbers, and I was like, all right, well, what else can I do? I've got this borrowed capital, I've got this tripled mortgage, I lost my job, and there's real estate is not something. Okay, this is a business, right? And I've got this friend who can help me get into it. So I said, all right, let's sign up for a few franchises, build them the idea was until I found a job, right? So build them, and then when I find a job, then we'll hire somebody to run it and keep that as something for the kids later on.
Right.
That's how it started.
That's actually the closest and the safest business to do, right? If you take a franchise, like all business is risky, but taking a franchise where the model's been tested, pricing is figured out, would you like it toasted or not? The whole shebang is like figured out, and you're basically trying not to mess it up.
True. I was actually just having this conversation the other day with a friend who was asking me about franchising, and I said, listen, from my experience with franchising, the way I look at it, a lot of, I think, if you would call a hardcore entrepreneur, people would look at it and say, franchising is not real entrepreneurship. It is. You're starting a business, right? The difference is with franchising, you are mitigating, in my opinion, 50% of the risk, which is that the concept has been proven. Somebody else has come up with the concept, whether it's a restaurant or a auto mechanic shop or whatever type of franchise it is. Somebody else has come up with the concept, figured out what the offering is, what's the pricing, who's the target customers, what are the key variables for success, etc. So all of that is taken off. That risk is taken off the table. What you have to worry about is the other 50%, which is execution. Right, so it's still a business. You're still being an entrepreneur. You got to take that risk. You got to make the investment, build the teams. Build the business, whatever it is, product, services, whatever you're into. So I think franchising can provide a better on ramp into the entrepreneurship journey. Right? If you're not one of those entrepreneurs that gets inspired with an idea and goes out and develops the whole concept, and you're just looking to get into something for your own.
And depending on the franchisor, you also learn a lot in terms of material that they give you and training and conferences. And
there's a lot of value add and brand recognition. So if you're fortunate enough to pick up a franchise that has a brand recognition, then that's also a big burden kind of lifted in terms of creating that brand awareness. Right? Yeah. So if I pick up franchise XYZ that maybe has 10 locations or branches around the world, nobody really knows it. So put up there the signboard if it's retail or food. I still have to educate the consumer about what is this brand, right? So
and maintaining service delivery and service standard is still your job, which is, as you said, the execution is still not easy in any business. It's still, especially, I'm guessing, and I've only worked in the food business behind the counter for a lot of years. I had a couple of years at Popeye's Chicken in the back there, and during university. It's literally the managers or the owners of that particular franchise would have to be there 24/7. They'd be there before anyone comes in. They'd be there last ones to leave. And maybe they'll get a respite for an hour in between, just because so many things can go wrong.
Yeah.
And just to keep an eye, like whether it's unethical employees, whether it's stock going bad, whether there's wastage, cleanliness.
And there's that other big factor called customers.
Customers, right? And taking care of them, because they are generally good people that take care of customers, but the pool of talent that you have access to may not have the best skills, and it's up to you to bring them up to. Look,
when we got into the food business with this journey, I have to say, I was looking, I was like, it should be easy. I mean, I've run major tech companies, global distribution companies. I mean, really, really complex businesses, right? I would say the food business is probably one of the most difficult, right? I mean, it was more challenging to build our Subway franchises than it was to run those businesses, right? It's a completely different business model if you're not coming from that industry. I'd never worked in a restaurant. I've only been a consumer, and a very good one at that. But I never knew anything about the operations, right? Of how does a restaurant run? And it was super challenging because there's also, as you mentioned, there's a ton of details. It's very detail oriented. It's very operationally heavy. It's as you mentioned, you've got to keep your eye on the ball on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You blink, you've lost money.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's spoilage, as you mentioned, staff employees,
Yeah.
you've got contractual stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's very intensive. And then for me personally, it was the more difficult transition was learning how to manage teams that are of a different, let's say, category, right? So instead of white collar, kind of more blue collar staff, where you're not necessarily dealing with people that have MBAs and, sophisticated communication skills and whatever. This is somebody who you're
the
basically
frameworks they use for conversations is very different.
And so it's quite difficult figuring out how to motivate the team, how to align with them, how to get loyalty, all that stuff. So it was a ton of learnings there.
Yeah, it's one of the common things that, so when I moved to Canada, when I was 18, one of the common businesses that immigrants ran was when they moved into Canada with a bunch of capital, couldn't find a job, the first thing they would look at is franchises.
Yeah, of course.
And how to run them. So we have a lot of, let's say, gas stations or Subway restaurants or burger joints. Tim Hortons, yeah. I think someone told me I need to buy at least 5 franchises to be even considered for Tim Hortons. It was like a two-year wait period.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, people still did that as a way, I guess, as an entry point.
Yes, it's an easier on-ramp. It's easier, right?
Yeah.
It's an easier out and ramp. And depending on the franchise, the capital requirement obviously can be lower, right, than something else. So if you want to do a gas station, that's probably $1 million, $2 million, I would guess, to get in. But if you're going to open up a 7-Eleven or something, those are just different entry points, right? Yeah.
Let's talk about that graph that you talked about, right? You had the burn rate kind of going down and income kind of going up. At what point, I know you talked about the intersection, but was there a point for this particular business where you realize you're onto something good? Like this is going to be your life now? Or when was the fact that you dropped, hey, you know what, I'm not going back to the job life? Because you started off with that hedge in mind, like if this doesn't work or if it starts working on its own, I'm going to go back into the job market. Did you ever drop the dreams completely of going back into corporate life or realizing you're onto something good and this is...
I think, reflecting back on it, I don't think there was a conscious decision that I said I'm not going back. I think it just kind of drifted away into the background, right? Because it just kind of happened. I think for the first couple of years, I was, as the economic crisis recovery started, I was taking interviews, right? So I would get calls from recruiters and whatever, and I would entertain those. Nothing was really a good fit. It just so happened, that nothing that came up was really a good fit. So I was still kind of open to it. I would say when we passed that intersection point, where that actually I can support the family and generate income out of the business, it's like, oh, okay, this is kind of good, right? It's like, then it's like all the stereotypical benefits of being an entrepreneur. You're your own boss. A lot of it is a myth, right? You keep your own schedule. You work actually more than you work in the corporate world. Yeah, it's not
your
a 9-6
per hour
job.
rate is
Your
actually
per hour rate,
atrocious.
and nobody cares what you're making, right? There's no annual reviews. There's no, annual bonuses. There's no ticket home. All that stuff. It's whatever is left is yours, whether that's negative or positive. So I think it just pretty much faded away and then I think it became then the challenge, right? Of, okay, can I build more? And can I make this grow? Can I replicate this, right? And then I went on from there.
Can I dig into that little piece there about, like, it's, I got sold into this entrepreneurship trap, partially because it was cool. Like, it's just cool to be an entrepreneur, right? Like, that's when I look back at when I started 3.5 years ago. So I'm still a newbie, still learning, still going through my graphs and finding my intersections. But one of the things that sold me into it was like, it's almost like smoking, right? You want to be cool in today's world, you got to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, especially now where we live, right? It's quite...
Yeah, especially with the media out there and the hustle culture. Couldn't be further from the truth. And we've been trying to find our meaning within it in different kind of ways, because I'm over the cool fact, as you said. But was that an immediate realization for you as well about how much work this really is? Because partially I started this podcast to help help certain entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs, but also partially to tell some entrepreneurs that it's probably not for you.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be dark and it's going to be gloomy, and you need a strong why to come out of it. So for any, how do you feel about that? The number of people going into entrepreneurship not realizing what it is. Are we overdoing it now? Should everyone try to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah. I don't think we are overdoing it. I actually, love entrepreneurship, love seeing all the development and support and investments governments and others are making into that, because I do think entrepreneurship is a great path for many people, but it's not for everybody, right? So I think there is a certain, cachet that has developed, where people think it's cool, and if you're not an entrepreneur, you're not, whatever, which is, oddly curious. I come from a generation where actually in certain, say, subcultures, it was frowned upon to be an employee. Right? Oh. So like if you talk to traditional family businesses, right, their value system is, unless you're an entrepreneur, you're nobody, right?
You're wasting your life.
If you're an employee, I mean, it was like an employee in those families are almost like a derogatory term, right? But through the years, and having known a number of entrepreneurs, it's not really for everybody, right? And I think it comes down to personalities, right? And ability. I think what it really, at the crux of it, it's your ability to deal with uncertainty. Because in entrepreneurship, there is no certainty. You come up with an idea, whatever it might be, right? Digital agency, consultancy, whatever. And you think there's a gap, and you can provide that service or that product, and you go at it. But there's uncertainty. It doesn't mean it's going to work. Are you going to get that client? Are they going to pay on time? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, you're trading off with entrepreneurship versus employment that certainty of income, right? There's no paycheck guaranteed to come at the end of each month. When you're working for somebody, the burden is on them to make sure that you get your paycheck each month, right? They made money, didn't make money, that's on them, right? Yeah. That level of uncertainty, I find is not for everybody to be able to deal with.
Yeah.
And how do you do that without, kind of losing your way?
Yeah. I keep quoting my favorite author on this show for a couple episodes when he said, the two most addictive things to humans: one, heroin; two, a monthly salary.
Yeah, I like that. I've never heard that.
It's very addictive, right? Like when you get that certainty just coming that certainty.
Through. That I'm getting extra a month. I can pay the electricity bill. I can pay my mortgage, rent.
Well, you can plan your life. Right? What I've learned is, if someone asks me, so like, where are you going to be in like 2 years? I'm like, ask me where I'm going to be tomorrow. Like
maybe I'll tell you.
Maybe I'll tell you, right? Like we were a COVID business as well in that sense. So we had. And this is where my chronological warning came in through. So we're going to jump places. But when COVID was around, everyone was couldn't plan, right? And because we were a COVID business, we never learned planning. So we at max had a 30, 60, 90-day plan, but we couldn't make a 5-year vision. We couldn't, because there's just so much uncertainty in the macro environment, plus the micro environment. Are we ready to do this? Right. Are we capable of doing this? Do we have the skills? Do we have what it takes to survive in this? So I wanted to ask you about both kinds of planning, micro and micro. So long term, and then we're gonna go to day to day as well, because I think that'll be interesting, and we'll find out what you do today because of that. But let's talk about long term planning. How do you think about that? Like, do you go out 5 years from now and try to vision stuff and then work backwards from it? And what does that process look like? How often does that happen when you do any long-term planning for your current business?
Yes and no. Do long-term planning? Yes and no, but it also depends on the nature of the business, right? So, for example, if I look at the F&B business, especially in the early days, no. There was no long-term planning. It was about survival. That was a survival game. Can I generate enough income to support my family fast enough? Once we crossed that threshold, then it was like, okay, what else can we do? So then you start going from no planning to, I would say, short to medium-term planning. Say, okay, we're generating this kind of, profit. We're living off of this much. If we can, manage things so we can open up one more location, 2 more locations. So, okay, next year I want to open 2 more locations, right? And you start planning from that. Then that horizon extends. Okay, so maybe over the next 3 to 5 years, we can get to X locations, right? But that's, for me, at least in my experience, that was kind of the extent of it with that. Because again, that business model as well, that's more typical of it, right? The growth is location based. Can you find a good location? Do you have the capital to invest in that new location? But then, different businesses, our current tech business, that's a completely different exercise, right?
Could you tell us about EduPloyment? Just a short.
So EduPloyment, in a short, the short intro is we're a social impact driven tech platform that's trying to reimagine the ecosystem of blue collar, or what we refer to as staff level recruitment, right? So like non-management, junior, mid-level staff in a variety of industries. And that was inspired through a number of things, including an EO event, and I can come back to that. But it was also came out of our experiences in the food business over the last 15 years, where we had personally recruited hundreds of individuals into our restaurants from these various backgrounds, from underprivileged countries, and where to them, this job at a relatively nominal salary, it was transformative, right, for them and their families, right? And seeing how providing them with what we call fair work, fair pay, fair treatment, a chance for development, et cetera, treating them as decent human beings as we would like to be treated, right? Mm-hmm. Regardless of their, skin color, background, religion, all that other stuff. It's just saying, okay, do your job, you get your pay, human. We're not going to yell at you. We're not going to scream at you. We're not going to. And that experience, we saw how it's transformed the lives of so many individuals, okay? Many of whom are still with us in that business. Yeah. And then it was really about the inspiration came of when I was introduced to this concept at an EO conference of a purpose-driven business, which is a proxy for a social impact business, where the concept of where you can actually solve a world problem and generate a profit at the same time, which, given my years, I'd never heard of, right? And I thought that was like, what?
It's an oxymoron.
Yeah, like, huh? I thought the whole idea is you build your business, build your profits, then you make a foundation, you do philanthropy on the side, all that stuff. But this novelty, I thought it was such a novel idea that you can actually have a business where at its core, what it does day to day is solving a problem, and it happens to generate a profit as well. And so
I'm going to come back to digging in a bit more into that. Just wanted to close the loop on. So we were talking about long-term planning. Yeah. And that's probably different for EduPloyment
100%
than it was, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, with the franchise, let's say Subway franchise, at least you have a very clear target. There's one potential way to grow, more locations.
Correct.
And continue following the formula until you get there. So it's very, I wouldn't say easy, but easier.
It's more mechanical,
It's more mechanical. It's half of it has been figured out. The direction has been figured out. Right. Execution is still up to you. But with something like EduPloyment,
that's completely different.
Because there's no model for it.
No.
You have to come up with. So how do you go about that long-term planning?
So that's what I was kind of referring to, is that two different set of experiences, right? So with EduPloyment, once we're inspired with the idea and decided that this could have legs, and this is something we should really look at, because it became a passion, right? It survived my litmus test of the idea didn't go away after a day or 2 or 3. Okay, so literally within, say, 10 days of being inspired with the idea, I'm like, we need to do this. And step 1 was a 4-day planning exercise of just a massive spreadsheet, building out the business model, right? Of saying, okay, how is this going to work? How do you generate revenue? What would be the numbers? What would be cost? La, 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 la. And it was literally a very long planning exercise. Yeah. And so for those kind of businesses, you almost have to start with the end to see that, okay, if we work towards that, is that going to be something meaningful, both in terms of results, impact in our case, as well as financial.
So how far out do you look? Do you look on a 5, 10, 15, next generation?
For me, it was 3 years. Tech business, tech startup, with the way tech moves and the industry happens, I think 3 years is a fair horizon. Yeah. Right? If you can see out that far. And obviously there's going to be adjustments and pivots along the way.
Okay.
You can extend all that out to 5, 7, 10 years, but I think that just becomes a mathematical exercise. The reliability of that model, I think, diminishes over time.
Yeah, I'm wondering for myself, the reason I asked this is more out of curiosity than how I can apply that to my own business, right? Like we're closer to your franchise business in the sense that agency life has pretty much been figured out. There's not much innovation in how you do it.
Right.
So the goal becomes like X number of clients, X number of revenue, and then you just do everything that's mechanical to get there as well. Versus what Alina and I are playing with and toying with, and we won't tell you guys much about it yet, is a bit more open, a bit more of a blue ocean kind of place where not a lot of people are doing it. There's not many examples to learn from. And we keep trying to think, okay, should we do a 3-year plan? Should we do a 5-year plan? Should we, the goal is for our life, at least now that we've figured out, like we want to feel the pain of entrepreneurship throughout our life. Let's do it with other stuff too. So serial entrepreneurship has been part of my vision board, right? I have this I've drawn this out, like a holding company with my name on it. Then I've got the agency, I've got this podcast, I've got that third thing that we're working on. And like, I want to have more of those just because it's a game I like playing now, versus just a way to make like a ton of money. Money's nice.
So a couple of points, if I may interject on that.
Please, yeah.
First, that's parallel entrepreneurship, not serial.
Oh, yes,
Okay?
that's true. Correct.
Everybody says serial. I'm like, okay, I understand serial. Serial is you do one, you finish, you do the next one, you finish. That's serial, right?
Perfect. Okay.
Parallel is you're running multiples, and that's a different story.
Yeah.
Right? You're running multiple, in
that is
parallel,
true.
right?
That is true.
And so, maybe offline.
No, I like that.
We can have a longer chat on that because that's a different journey.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are serial entrepreneurs. They built a business, they exit.
Yeah.
They go on and take a break for a few months. Then they're like, oh, let's do another thing, and they go on. Doing multiple businesses, that's a completely different game. And again, that's not, in my humble opinion, a game for every type of entrepreneur, right? Because it is a completely different thing. It's the difference between having one child and 3 children, right? I mean,
let's get into it. So there's 3 different. I'll add another one. So we've got serial, we've got parallel. Then I would say there's one called a repeat entrepreneur. So serial entrepreneurs, the way I look at it, they do one business and they could do completely something different for their next one, but they're focused on one thing at a time, 6, 10 years, whatever it is. Then parallel, as you mentioned, eggs in different baskets, mind in different places, focus is off. And then the last one is a repeat entrepreneurs. Like, I know how food works. I'm going to do food for every business, a little differently.
Right.
First it was this, but it's still feeding people.
Yeah, but I'm going to disagree with you. On an entrepreneurship level, that's still either serial or parallel, regardless of the domain.
Right.
Right. So whether your next venture is a repeat industry or concept, right, or a brand new industry or concept, it's still another business. It's a business.
Right. Like it's your focus at that point.
At a higher level of abstraction, so to speak. It's another business. Now, what that business does could be either something you've got previous experience in, or something completely new.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. So tell me about the dangers of parallel businesses. And you mentioned that it's not for every type of entrepreneur. So I'm basically, at the end of this podcast, Alina and I listen to these and we're like, is there any...
What nuggets can we pull out?
Yeah. So let's build a checklist of like, what does it take to be a parallel entrepreneur versus a serial entrepreneur?
So I think, now that I think about it, I think there's a bit of a gradient, right? I think some people's journeys go, first business and then the next business, closing the first one or selling it, or as serial, right? And then some start doing parallel, and then as they get to advanced parallel, they basically graduate to being effectively an investor. You know what I mean? Where they get an idea, they've got capital, they say, okay, I want to now launch this new business in X, right? And they're not building and operating. They're basically saying they're now at maybe an enviable position of saying, I think there's an opportunity in this space and I think we should do it. But it's not bets. Them going in, rolling up their sleeves, bootstrapping it, operationally speaking, right? They're going to go and say, okay, what does it take to build that business? What's the plan? Okay, I need a team of 10, 20 people, this much capital. We need,
we need an operator.
We need a factory or we need an office or whatever. And they put in the capital, build the teams, stand it up, and then they're basically sitting back and somebody else is operating it, right? So I think that's kind of more kind of an advanced ultimate stage, right? And so I can share in that vision board that you have is, I would love to get to that point, right? Because there's no shortage of ideas, right? It's your bandwidth, right?
Yeah.
And so to come back to your question, the challenges is, it all really comes down to how you're going to manage your time and focus, right? And it's very much dependent on the level of maturity of your current business. So now you're doing parallel, right? So that means by definition, you've got at least one, if not two things happening, right? Are they at a level of maturity where they're effectively at an autopilot type level, or where you can manage them with a minimal level of effort and time investment? Or are they still pretty demanding? Yeah. Right? If they're still pretty demanding, where you're putting in a significant amount of time on a regular basis, then I think it becomes then you have to really look at it honestly and say, are you going to be fair to either business by splitting your time? Yeah. Right? Are you going to get the maximum results potential out of both if you're split? Sometimes you're forced to do that because of circumstances, right?
Necessity.
You don't have the capital to go on
parallel entrepreneurship by necessity.
By necessity. It's a tough one to sell. That's a tough one to sell. Why did you have to become a parallel? That's a tough one. I guess it's an entrepreneurship because I couldn't get rid of the ideas. I had to do it. Somebody had to do it.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. Like we talk about this a lot in terms of being fair. In fact, that particular phrase comes up in our household. Like, are we going to be fair to our current business if we go and cheat on our current business and do the other thing? So it usually happens. So what happens for us is, part of it is the business on autopilot, and can we do another one? Which luckily we're there. The other part also is about. The second part, as you mentioned, is the calling. Something is just pulling you so that you cannot not do it. Yeah. And the third part of it is also, and I've heard this from like other friends, and I hope I don't get to feel this, but sometimes you fall out of love with your own business. Yeah. In the fact that you've set it up and you've done the hard work, but you're just not in love with it anymore. Right. And you're looking for, and that's fine too. And I mean, if it happens, it's fine too. For us, but that's another reason to. Yes,
I was just having this conversation this weekend with a friend, right, who actually made a comment to that effect that they've fallen out of love, right? Yeah, I'm like, it's okay. Yeah, who says that you have to be in love with your business? I mean, again, that's part of what's out there today, right? In terms of the media and books, etc. About entrepreneurship, it's got to be your passion. It's got to be what drives you. Yeah, absolutely. That's That's the ideal that you're shooting for. But if it's a healthy business, growing at a respectable rate, whatever it is, it's providing employment for people, it's providing a valuable service or product to whoever they call as customers, what's wrong with that? And if it's continued to operate, I mean, if you extrapolate this out, who are the publicly traded companies in love with the business? Right? The founders are typically long gone or out of the business. Right. Yeah. So who is it that's in love with? I mean, okay, forget the exceptions like Amazon and Facebook and whatever, where the founders are still around. Yeah. Okay, but GE. Yeah. Okay. I mean, who in, or any of these big companies, who is it that's there going, I'm so passionate about that. Yeah. Okay. It's a business. It's providing a valuable. So I think it's okay. As entrepreneurs, I think as entrepreneurs, we need to give ourselves a break. And I also think our emotional journey with our businesses goes through multiple phases. Okay. I mean, this could be probably quite risky to say, but, even like in a personal relationship, as a married couple, right? The level of passion and whatever is going to fluctuate over the years, right? Yeah. And it's not like you're just as madly in love and it's all heart. No, there's practicalities of life. So it's okay that you go through, and a lot frequently I find with my friends who are entrepreneurs that have gone through this, and me myself, have gone through this, is when you feel like you're out of love with your business, there's something else going on in your life. Okay. whether it's personal, whether it's medical, whether it's your family, whether it's you're inspired by a new idea. So that's like kind of distracting you from this.
Shiny things. Yeah. We do wake up some days not wanting to do anything with our business, in the sense that we just want to burn it down. But
burn it down?
Burn it down to the
ground. Not just let it be. You want to burn it down.
Just burn
really?
It down to the ground. Some days are frustrating, more frustrating than the others. And we have our own ways of giving each other therapy around it. So one of our favorite forms of therapy is going to a cafe, taking the day off, and jamming on different business ideas. In about 4 hours, we fall back in love with our current business. We're like, no, we have
the grass is not greener on the other side.
Yeah, we're like, what we have is pretty good. We just had a bad day.
Yeah.
Let's go check on our hormones, because I think they're very loud.
Well, you got to be careful with that, because, like I said, there's a lot we could share, because you're also co-entrepreneurs, as I like to refer to it, as a couple, right? The same as in our case.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different journey, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a different challenge, because frequently as a couple you're tightly synchronized, right? You know each other quite well, and there are days where that's the majority of days that's a massive pro, and that's actually a competitive advantage, right? But there are days where it can work against, right? So if you're both in a funk, because of, let's say, something happened at home, not necessarily between you, family member was, whatever it is, right? You're both in that space. Unlike when you've got, a partner who's not your spouse, they had a great day yesterday, everything is fine, so they'll pick you up when you're down. So there's a bit more of a challenge when the founders.
I have a whole section on that. I'm just going to get into it now, because it resonates so much what you're saying with us. So the way we think about it is, we have 3 versions of us as a couple. There is 1 + 1 is 2. There's 1 + 1 is 3, and there's 1 + 1 is 0. So combining the two of us always gives us a different combination based on the circumstances we're going through in life. Sometimes when we're 1 + 1 is 3, that means what we can do together is more than what we can accomplish on our own. Sometimes we're just equals, and sometimes when we get into groupthink, when we're both in a funk and we both can't get out of it, or if we're both excited about the wrong thing together, and that can happen sometimes. So I wanted to see, how long have you partnered up with your wife over your life in business, and B, how do you avoid groupthink? How do you maintain a healthy challenging of each other's, or because we do find that we get into groupthink unless one of us snaps out of it, like, hold on, let me take the other side.
Yeah.
How's that work for you guys?
Love that question. I believe being co-entrepreneurs is 1 + 1 = 3. And we need to strive to make sure that it's always that, right? But I can relate to the 2 and the 0, right? I think the 0, which is you're compartmentalizing that only in terms of the groupthink, right?
Yeah.
Is something that as you mature as couples, because you very rightly asked me how long we've been co-entrepreneurs, and I think we're 10, 11 years now, out of this 15-year current journey, which is also different than if it wasn't from day 0. I mean, technically, my wife Rana is she's been an equity partner from day 1. Right. So from an equity perspective, she's a partner, but operationally, she wasn't in the business for the first 4 or 5 years. Okay. Right. And also, and I've said this to a couple of potential investors that have challenged us on being co-entrepreneurs. I said, listen, this is our 4th startup. Okay. This is a 30-plus-year-old proven partnership. Okay. First startup was the family. Second startup was the Subway business. Third startup was our candy and chocolate store. 4th startup is that deployment, right? If you're looking for a team that you don't have to worry about, can they get along? Because disputes and fallouts between co-founders are notorious, right? I mean, the last company that I mentioned that collapsed, that pushed me into entrepreneurship by necessity, it collapsed because of a shareholder dispute. Okay, and they lost a ton of money. Because of egos and personalities that clashed. So point being is, it's it's a different challenge. So I think we need to strive to always make it 1 + 1 equals 3.
Absolutely.
I think the zeros start fading away with time as you as individuals in that relationship become more aware of your power of influence over the other. Right? So frequently in my discussions with my wife as my partner, because you have different types of discussions, it's like, look, I know I can sell you. I know I can convince you, but what is it that you think?
Yeah.
Right? And then over time, and I was saying early on in our journey as co-entrepreneurs, there was a lot of that, especially a lot of that where you could say I overshadowed, right? Or overrode, right? But that was also because she came into the business as it was maturing. She came into it operationally as it was maturing. So naturally, I had a lot more know-how. I had like 5 years on her running this business, right? So when she came in, it was like, okay, day-to-day stuff,
to speed,
right?
Yeah.
As time goes by, she challenges me, right? It's like she knows, more so. So I think we become more aware as a couple.
Yeah.
And you figure out different tactics of how to make sure that you're not getting into groupthink.
Yeah, for me, it was the opposite. So Alina started the business. She was
When you came in,
she was a freelancer turned agency.
Good. She's the boss.
She's the boss. She's always the boss.
Good.
She's the CEO. I'm the CEO.
What's the extra E?
Chief Everything Else Officer.
Oh, okay.
I'm the guy that does the everything else bit.
Of course. Catch all.
Yeah, exactly. One of those, right?
Right.
So we, and I'll talk about that in my next question too, but we get into this. I'm also a bit more like you in the sense I'm very persuasive. Even though I haven't fully thought something through, it's my sales bone. It just strikes up. I can make a really bad argument, but very convincing.
You can win every bad argument, yes.
It's also a confidence thing. She knows she has a bit lesser confidence than me. We blame it on testosterone versus estrogen, but like it could be anything else. And she's definitely more of the feeler of things, which I think is true for you as well. She intuitively knows the direction we need to take.
Yeah.
But doesn't always have the articulation behind it. And it takes her a bit of prodding and pushing of my bad persuasion to bring out the real juice. So what I've started to pick up now, and I didn't pick this up when we first started, is I'll make a convincing argument before, and I just walk away thinking the sale is done, right? Deal's closed.
Right.
Lately, I've started noticing body language and being like, okay, that didn't settle. That hasn't sunk in.
Yeah.
Or this is the second time I'm saying the same thing, but to her, it's sounding like the first time she said it. So can we take a pause? And when we do our regular board meeting, so we have a time blocked in for like a board meeting, my mom finds it cute. She's like, you're doing what?
That's
like,
hilarious.
I'm taking her we're going for a board meeting. She's like, you guys meet? Don't you work together 10 hours a day? I'm like, yeah, but we need to separate everything else and meet
practice,
there. But I'm wondering what other things I can do to be a bit more, not just self-aware, but aware of her as well. And we keep coming up with new ways of understanding each other, but at the same time also not being too overpowering. So it's a journey, but I think the chemistry is there. We did a few failed businesses before, if you can call them that. They were so bad that we never even registered them.
They never made it to that stage.
They never made it. There's one with clothing that we did. We started buying used clothing from Indian and Pakistani women that wouldn't wear the wedding dress twice. And we started selling them used and secondhand for the underprivileged that didn't have access to the $100.
There's a whole bunch of startups in that space now.
Didn't really work. And then we tried importing some things from Alibaba, like, we're going to sell this in Toronto. But we knew that whatever we do together, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
And as long as it's fun, we'll do our best. And if we do our best, we're going to accomplish our goals, whether they're financial or
which I think is wonderful. Things. I think it's the true definition of a family business. And I think I really, truly believe that it is a 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah.
And it's a unique competitive advantage. I mean, you should see, and I'm sure you've had the experience, if you reflect on it, meetings with third parties, right? So we're not your internal meetings, your board meetings, right?
Yeah.
It's when you're meeting with clients, suppliers, whatever it is.
Yeah.
They can't win. right?
Yeah.
Because you're both there negotiating whatever you're negotiating.
It's true.
You know each other's body language, you know what they're thinking, where they're going, even if you haven't rehearsed, ahead of time, etc. It's a massive competitive advantage against them. And especially when, as you mentioned, she's more the feeler, right? And you're maybe more the kind of analytical, right? Type person. Yin and yang, that balance, right? Because you need that in both. If you're the analytical person, you miss that feel, you miss that body language, you miss that those cues, right? You might not get, and they will get.
Yeah.
Okay, and vice versa. And so to give you a preview of where you guys could end up, because you're 3 years into this journey, right? And so you're going to get to a point where you're doing your pitch to her, doing your whole analytical thing, and you're talking, right? And you're like, if this and this and that and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then you made your point, and you're like, okay, we should do this. And then you go, almost out of courtesy, and what do you think? And she goes, ta 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 ta. And you're like, oh, God, I just wasted 15 minutes doing this whole pitch. She knows exactly what the right answer is. She'll cut through all of the permutations, right? Yeah. And go straight to what you didn't see as the clear path through it, right? Now, how does that happen? It's experience, it's chemistry, it's understanding the thinking. She's listening to you, but then she can, because you're the one pitching it, you're not necessarily seeing the most efficient path to that decision. So it's quite cool.
I know. I can't wait for more experiences. One of my favorite ones right now is when she yells out, "Oh my God, are you in my head?" The more times a day that happens, it feels really nice, because at least the wavelength is there. Like I know what you're thinking. Yeah, the alignment. But the other thing, like you mentioned, negotiating with clients and investors or partners become easier. I feel like it always also, and tell me this is right, helps with team building, because now as like founders or a couple, you have an edge that you can be cute. And I say this, and I've chosen this word. This is the word I'll use. Explicitly, cute. Yeah, cute. We can be a cute founder couple when we're working with our team and motivate, whether they're remote, especially now all our team is remote. But we can have that chemistry as a part of our culture. The fact that we have a different persona as a different kind of boss. Yeah. Like we're wearing a different costume as your typical boss would. I would strongly disagree with the word costume. All right. Because that implies fake. Yeah. Right? No, because you're not fake. You're just different personalities. Yeah. Right? Yeah. You're different personalities that that are showing up to work. Yeah. I think internally with the teams, massive advantage. Mm-hmm. Massive advantage. Again, if there's especially when there's a distinct difference in the personalities. Like if you're both kind of the analytical, hardcore driving, hard driving kind of business, numbers kind of person, right? Yeah. If you're both the same thing, it's not additive, right? Yeah. But when somebody's a bit more of, let's say, the creative or, the soft touch, right? Yeah. Then, it's, how in families, they always talk about kids playing mom against dad. All right. I think in this scenario, it's mom and dad playing each other against the team. If that was the analogy, right? Yeah. It's certain things like, okay, you handle that, right? Oh, this person is really upset. And by the way, it's really, really critical in team building, right? And especially when you're building businesses in those early days when there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of stuff happening. The team is your biggest asset, right? And you want to find that balance, strike that balance of making sure that they're happy and productive, and you don't want to turn it into kind of therapy sessions, and you want to be able to kind of drive business results. But in order to drive business results, you need to make sure the team is happy and functional, right? And we need, individually, regardless of our gender, need to figure out which we're better at, right? Yeah. So I personally tend to be more of the, well, I'd like to think I'm very intuitive and empathetic and all of that. I'm nowhere close to Rana on that, right? I'm more of the business, numbers, what are we doing, what are the plans, this was due, not due, execution, strategy, etc. And she brings a lot of that human element to it, right? Which is really cool. Yeah, I mean, so we've turned this into about a co-entrepreneurship. 100%. I will move to the. No, that's fine. I'm happy to. No, but I do want to make one last point about what you just said about having that kind of balance in how you build teams. in terms of what role you play for them, whether it's therapy or like hard pushing and motivating. When I became a manager at my corporate job, I was 28 at the time, too young to be a manager. I'm 36 now. That was 8 years ago. I was just a therapy guy, literally just treating people like humans all the time and not focusing on deliverables, output, deadlines. And that bit me in my behind quite a bit, because that's the culture I grew up with in Canada, especially. They treat everyone fairly. Like, there's, in contrast to other regions in the world, it's a bit over fair, but we were taught that. And my best manager had done that for me. She'd not been analytical, but she got the best out of me by being human with me. Right. So I thought I'd try the same. Didn't work out too well. So I constantly missed my numbers as a manager. And only when I started to turn the heat up. So I'm still learning. Like that's just a ongoing thing on how to balance a fire.
But that's part of your journey of learning how to manage, right? Is that you got to develop the toolkits and understanding that for this team member, you need to be more humanistic. And for this team member, they only respond to hardcore tactics, right? And so, I think the first time I became a manager, maybe I was 23, and I was managing 50-year-olds. Right. Yeah. And that was similar. That was a massive. It was like, how do you get? And this was in the U.S. And
you feel like an imposter, like these.
Yeah, you feel like an imposter. They feel like who's this kid that thinks they know everything. And there are a lot of bumps, bumps on the road. Yeah, but your challenge is to learn and improve. Man,
team building, I can talk about 7 hours with you. I'm sure, but I do want to go back to. Did you ever in your life think about doing a social impact business?
I didn't know they existed, so I wasn't capable of thinking of doing one. I just didn't. It's almost like saying I didn't know that color existed in the spectrum, right? I just didn't know, right? I mean, I know businesses do business, and businesses do CSR and philanthropy and whatever. I'd never known that. I've probably come across examples. I'm sure I did. If somebody that says, okay, they're buying things from the villagers and whatever basket we've woven by the villagers and selling it, but not contextualized in that framework, right? And so no, I had not. Again, like I said, I didn't know it was an option to even consider. That experience is very distinct, and I think it's burnt into my memory, right? Because it was 2 speakers. It was a regional event, so it was quite large, 500 plus people. And one of them was this gentleman who'd spent most of his career in the NGO space, UN type organizations, etc. And he is the one that introduced this concept of purpose-driven businesses. I don't think it was an original thing that he's invented, but that's what he was the topic of his speech. Mm-hmm. And it really hit me. I had as you would say, a moment. Right? My wife was with me attending. We were sitting there, and he goes through this thing, and it hit me, and I had a moment, and I literally almost collapsed in my chair. And Donna looked at him and said, "Are you okay?" She thought I was having a heart attack, right? And I said,
I just felt that strong.
Yeah, I mean, it was like the man was speaking to me, right? And it hit me, and I just looked at her and I said, "Listen, baby," I said, "if we can figure out what our true purpose is, and it's something that comes from within us. It's not a purpose that we adopt to say, let's go, adopt the cause of saving the forests or something. It's something that really comes from within us that we're not adopting." And I said, if we can figure that out and then figure out a business to do with that, then I think the word I used was like unstoppable or something. That knowing what we're capable of doing, executing, I think we can do something really great. And I think her reaction was, and you'll meet her one day. I think her reaction was really like, okay, Mazen is off with, another one of his.
There he goes again.
There he goes again, right? Because I'm pretty passionate, pretty creative person, and when it comes to those kind of business ideas, right? But I was so moved that when the gentleman got off stage, I did a beeline to him and I went straight to him. I mean, he just literally just stepped off stage, and I went to him and said, "I just want you to know that you just effed my brain." Okay, and he's like, "Who's this guy in Kandura, coming up, saying this to me?" We then became, quite friends. We had a number of different chats and calls and whatever, just to learn more, from him. I said, "Listen, I've never heard of this. I can't think anymore." Right. So that was the first thing is kind of created that platform of the idea, of the concept of a purpose-driven business. And then there was later on in the day, there was a second speaker who happened to be a former central bank governor of Nigeria. I think it was a Nigerian prince, very eloquent, Western educated.
Was he selling boats, rubber boats?
No. He was basically selling FDI, right? He was basically talking about Nigeria, right? A country that obviously we know existed, but I didn't know much about it, honestly, right? So he was started off by talking about 200 million population and 70 to 80% poverty. And I found that astounding. I honestly, at the time, didn't know those facts, right?
70 to 80%.
70 to 80%.
And it's a large country.
On 200 million population. That's a lot of millions of, people that are living in poverty, right?
Like $1 a day kind of thing?
Well, so poverty has different levels, right? So, extreme poverty is less than $1 a day. Moderate poverty is $1 to $3, and then you go up. He wasn't that specific. He was just, poverty. So they're below the poverty line, right? And then the rest of his talk was really highlighting the virtues of Nigeria and basically, pitching for foreign direct investment, people to come build factories and railroads and, things like that. And I was like, that's pretty cool, man. Good, it's good for him. It's trying to, improve his country. But I was like, I was like, oh my God, that's a tough road, right? I mean, to solve this problem of 70, 80% poverty, how long is it going to take to get all that foreign direct investment in and matured and whatever? And literally that evening, the inspiration for deployment came. I'm like, he's trying to solve poverty, right? And became very quickly clear to me that our purpose, both myself and Rana, is education. Because in our personal journeys, we are where we are today because of our education. And that sounds so cliche because everybody talks about how important education is, right? But we literally can trace every step in our life and trace it back to our education, right? And I spent 16 years in university. Rana spent, 8+ years, getting her doctorate, etc. In my case, it was various disciplines and learned, a number of different things. And we're lifelong learners. And that's the thing. So education is not just as in degrees only, right? It's being lifelong learners, right? I'm really not happy unless I learn something new every day. Okay, every day. Okay, it just happens. So realizing that and saying, oh, that's our purpose. How can we use that? How can we use tech? How can we help solve the problem? And the problem that we looked at is poverty, right? And moderate poverty, the $1 to $3 range. So we're not talking about beggars on the street, right? These are employed day workers. They have a job, but given the economies they're in, don't have much earning. And there's over 611 million of them in our just phase 1 countries, right? There's over 1 billion individuals living in moderate poverty around the world. And that's a huge
percentage.
A huge percentage, a huge number, right? And so if we can make a dent in that with our effort, that's great. So that's what we, that's the inspiration. That's what drives us, right? It's not necessarily what we lead with anymore when we're talking to potential investors or our employers, because today deployment is a live, business, a platform with transactions and hiring and candidates, et cetera, happening. So it's not necessarily what you market. It is a big part of how we distinguish ourselves from competitors, but that's what drives us, right? So that when we first launched, just to punctuate the point, when we launched our first MVP of the app to get candidates on the platform, and so up till that point, it's just a dream in your head, right? And when we did our first release, woke up the next morning, just like being expectant new parents, right? The baby's born, all right? Woke up, got on the system. I'm like, oh my God, Rana, 100 people downloaded the app and signed up, right? And we were high-fiving and, super excited. Like, oh my, it actually worked. That, actually managed to get 100 people on the first day to download the app and sign up. That excitement lasted all of 10 minutes.
What?
Okay, honest to God. Because then we both, almost at the same instant, sat there and were like, oh shit. These 100 people believed in the promise that we communicated to them. And now we have the responsibility or the burden to deliver on that promise. And the rest of the journey continues.
That's a good
So
thing.
it's not, so while it was an objective measure of early success, it was because we're driven by our purpose, right? It's like, okay, it's not just about getting them. Now we got to get them jobs.
Yeah.
Now we got to get them learning English.
Yeah.
Now, etc. It's all about them.
Yeah.
Right. It's not about us. Inshallah, we'll make money down the road from it, but should be almost like a byproduct.
Yeah. This is brilliant because you said you didn't even know that this existed before you went to that event, and you're the only guest on this show so far. So I've had 25, 26 people on that has a venture like this, purpose-driven, social impact based. So it's definitely something that when I was maybe 10 years ago, I used to think about this stuff. And tell me if this is wrong, okay? For someone looking to get into and do this kind of thing, what I was told, or my ideal self told me, like, so my dad got sick. He has Parkinson's, and
Sorry to hear
that really changed. And I was pretty young, and I had to take the reins for the family pretty early, and it got my mindset into the fact that, that's my service, my calling is here, and I need to help him, and then help those that are like him and they're suffering because there's no cure. And then what can we do? Started doing volunteering. Like, I became chair of the Parkinson's support group. They made a different support group just for children of people with parents who have Parkinson's and stuff like that. Started interviewing with a lot of societies, Alzheimer's Society, Parkinson's Society. And reality struck me in that point, because I was pretty young. I was 25, 26, 27, around that time, that there wasn't a lot of money in it. And I still need to pay the bills, not just for myself now, but for them as well. And then someone told me, like, listen, your goal in life is to take care of yourself first. And once you've done that, you can go ahead and take care of the rest. So that's the kind of journey I've been on. I wonder if that is the right path in terms of, like, if someone has an innate internal desire to pursue good outside of themselves, but they have realities to contend with, is it better to it is the drive right now to go and build myself for that future to come by. Does it have to be chronological in that way?
Or does it have to be that way at all? What's the goal? What is the goal? Is the goal success measured by financial metrics? Is the goal happiness and fulfillment? What is the goal?
Well, what if the goal is stability first? Let's not even say
different. But it's different. Naeem, I would challenge you on that. Mm-hmm. Right, and this goes to kind of a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which I've only learned recently, recent years. Many of us go through life driven by the need to survive, the need for financial stability, the need to support our dependents, etc. Those are realities, and many times harsh realities that we have to deal with. But I think what most of us miss, and something that I'm trying to get my own kids now, who are adults, to think about is, what is it? How is it that you want to live your life? What is the objective? Right? Is it just financial stability, and so you can buy the next bigger house or car, or support your family, or what have you? But what is it that you want? Maybe you would be in your best form and happiest being an activist in the Parkinson's research ecosystem. And you might make 10% of what you're making and living a decent, respectable life, but not necessarily driving the Bentley or whatever your other aspirations might be, financially. Which one do you want? What is it? So it all, to me, it almost translates to what's the definition of success,
Yeah.
right? So if you live out your life journey and you kind of assess it at a milestone or at an endpoint, have you been successful? What is that success?
Yeah.
And that's a very entangled question.
Yeah. I can see and draw an analogy. So my vision of what I want is more, it's blurry at best, but I can start seeing specks in it. But the analogy I want to draw is, I have a friend who loves riding. Riding
horses, bikes, or riding. Okay.
Writing nonfiction.
Literature. Okay.
Yeah.
Nonfiction. Okay.
And they're very good at communicating themselves in words, and they feel a flow when they're doing that. And they constantly shove that goal away because they want to earn a living and have stability and all these things. Not that they want to drive Bentley, but they want to do this. Sure. So I had a chat with them, and I said, listen, I'm going to look at lives of authors, because I do read a lot and I follow lives of authors and stuff like that. It's not sexy,
no,
but they are finding meaning in doing that, whether it's imparting knowledge, whether it's doing research for the masses of things that are undiscovered and they're putting it into words. Yeah, they live in a 1-bedroom flat. It's not fancy, they put together money for a metro ticket and stuff like that, but they're writing. Like if that's the goal, like if that gives you the flow in your life, then that's a small price to pay. But it's easier to say to others than to feel it for yourself. It always is for me.
It's very true. It's very true. So I mean, just to give you an example, so I went through one of those decisions early on in my journey. So the original goal, since as early as I can remember, was I wanted to be a doctor, medical doctor, and then became a neurosurgeon, only because at the time I thought that was the most difficult thing. So the challenge, right? Always been a sucker for a challenge.
Yeah.
When medical school didn't work out, and I was in my 7th year in university, working on my second master's, going from being in neurobiology and electron microscopy and all of that to going into IT and tech and the business school, and then coming back to do my PhD in zoology was the major, but it was all neurobio, etc. They put me in the master's program because I didn't have a previous master's. And then they came after 1 year and said, okay, congratulations, now we're going to upgrade you to the PhD program. Being as naive as sometimes we are, I'd never looked into the financial aspect of it. At that time, I was driven by the science. My first love is the sciences. And I was still doing my research and electron microscopy and all this other stuff. And then I looked at my advisor, professor, who also happened to be my business partner in my first tech startup. I said, how much do you make? And at that point in time, he had been a tenured professor at the university in Washington, D.C. for 27 years. And his salary was, back then, was $35,000 a year.
What year was this?
90-something, 92 or 93. The plumbers and electricians at the university made more money than he did because they were unionized, right? And it sounds so naive to say, no, I'd invested all those years, in that track, of the sciences, because even though I did my master's in IT and I did my tech startup, I was still doing research and publishing, and teaching, in the sciences. And I'm like, what? I can't live on that. Not that I've ever had a fancy lifestyle, but that's like nothing, And so I was like, no. While I love academia, because at that juncture in my life, if I had continued and accepted the upgrade to the PhD in the sciences, then effectively my only viable employment path was to become an academic, which is massively respectable. Right, and something I one day maybe would love to go back to, right? But it's not for me. It wasn't the financial part. So there are realities in life, and each of us have to make those decisions and figure out what's the right compromise for them. In hindsight, I'm so grateful, for how those events turned out, and that I, walked away from that and started my PhD program in tech, right, and continued on the rest of my journey in the tech space and in the business world, because that was another part of me that was just nascent at the time that I wasn't really listening to.
Yeah. I'm going to say out, we're going to switch topics again as my brain is doing, but one last thing I want to say out loud to the world, and I want you to hear, and I want this to be on record of something that I've told Alina for a long time, something that I wanted to do, and I've always put that as a when I'm 60 thing, or
when
like
M60?
when I'm 60.
Oh, when I'm 60.
Or
okay.
like when I'm close to retirement, when I'm fully, I've figured everything out, and I'm very stable. I always wanted to build a soccer school or a football school for underprivileged kids in Pakistan, just to give them a sense of teamwork, a team sense of winning, sense of losing, humility, get them off jobs, get them off drugs, get them off whatever else it is, and give them, because I love that sport and I love playing it and I love what it's done for me. And I hope that would be one way to impact the kids that don't, like, give them football shoes, give them kits and everything, make them feel like they're on the pitch and have those memories kind of live with them. And I'm just sitting here and talking to you and wondering if it needs to happen when I'm 60, or like, what am I waiting for? But I need to digest that.
So let me push you on that.
It's happening.
Okay, and you're blushing.
I'm going to fall off
let me push you on that. So I had a similar experience, and I was having this conversation with a friend. This was about 6 years ago, and I was articulating, my dreams of when I have that financial stability, and you characterize it at 60, but I suspect it's not age related. It's more financial stability related, right? That when you're in a position to be able to do that, right? And he listened, and we're at a retreat, very unique experience, and he listened, and his answer was very simple. He said, Mazen, what if someday never comes?
Oh, come on. You're breaking me now.
And I swear to you, at that moment, as if he picked up a brick and hit me over the head with it. And that's when I realized, and that was part of a number of transformations that I've gone through, but that's when I realized that we can't live life on hold. And I think it's particularly important for entrepreneurs, because as entrepreneurs, especially when we're in early building phase, but as an entrepreneur, it feels like you're always building, right? It's like the finish line is,
there is no finish line.
There is no finish line, right? Because the minute you reach that milestone, that next revenue number, that next whatever, you've already set the next goal before you even reached it, right? As soon as it's within sight, you're already thinking
it's a pit
bigger,
stop at
right?
best.
Most of us even don't even recognize it, right? You just kind of blast through it, right? It's like running continuous marathons or something. Mm-hmm. And so we keep living life on hold, but also for entrepreneurs, because much of our success as an entrepreneur, unfortunately, is defined by financials, right? You're a successful entrepreneur as if you are what? You have how many zeros on your bank account or balance sheet or what have you, which I really don't like, right? Because there's many other measures for success. So if that's the measure of successful entrepreneur, I am not, as we sit here today, okay? If the measure of a successful entrepreneur is building businesses and providing employment and providing valuable services and products to customers, I'm a successful entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
My take home from that is a completely different story, right? Yeah. But what I realized at that moment is, at least for me, and I think it's true for a lot of other entrepreneurs, in that journey, that never-ending journey of entrepreneurship, there's a lot of things that we keep pending. When we get to X, I will do, right? And more importantly, I realized that our mental state, as I like to refer to it, state of mind, right, is directly correlated to the state of the business. So when that friend said that to me, right, at that time, I realized that, oh my God, my state of mind is directly related to my business. So every morning when I get my sales reports, if the numbers are up, life is wonderful and I'm doing great. Sales are down, I'm in the dumps, right? And I was like, that's not healthy, right? I'm not in control of my own state of mind. It's, 1,000 random customers that choose to walk into my restaurants or not, right? And that's going to impact how I believe. And so that statement, so back to your point, what if someday never comes?
Yeah.
What are you waiting for? Where there's a will, there's a way. It might not be as big of a school, it might not be in the right location, or whatever, but you can do something.
Yeah, waiting for conditions to be perfect it's something I intellectually understand, but I don't practice as much. So let this be on record that I need to at least have a think about it. I do relate to you, and I thank you for saying something you said in that when you said, if the only measure for being a successful entrepreneur is just money, then I am not. Because Alina and I have struggled to say that because it sounds so cheesy, but I'll just say it, that we're doing business as our own creative expression in the sense of, are we living our true self? That's the first goal. Money is not the first goal. And it's so hard to say that with, especially the last year, and I'll move topics right after this statement, but of this culture where it's just keep grow. Why don't you grow? Get more clients, get more money, do this, do that, do this. And we literally knew something was wrong with us, and we're a bit more inclined. I feel like I'm a bit more inclined to live a life closer to some of the principles that you're discussing and mentioning, and these things are resonating with me because they already exist inside. So I do need to bring them out. This is a note for Alina. We need to chat. Let's talk about job descriptions. What a shift. Yeah. Have you currently written a job description for yourself of what you do at Eduployment?
No, why would I ever do that? I'm CEO, Chief Everything Officer. Chief Everything Officer. So the job description is one word, everything.
Which hat do you enjoy the most?
Look, it changes from day to day. There's certain days that you enjoy one thing over the other, but I think there's certain competencies, right, that we need to be very honest with ourselves, that we, especially in a team setting, when you have co-founders, whether they happen to be your spouse or otherwise, you need to be very honest with yourself and say, okay, what is it that I not just enjoy? Sometimes you can enjoy something, but you're bad at it. I mean, I might enjoy painting, but I'm a terrible painter.
I challenge that.
Okay.
If you genuinely enjoy something and become good at it over time.
Only if you choose to invest the time in it. Okay.
But the enjoyment is pulling you though, right?
It could. I mean, it can. Yeah. Right? It can.
But yeah.
So I could choose to invest, 10 hours a week learning how to paint.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be.
But it's not useful. Yeah.
Okay. It's not about useful. It's just not something that I'm my creativity is not in that way.
Sure.
Right. It doesn't come out that way.
Yeah.
Right. I actually do graphics design. I actually do business design. I do tech design. So to answer your question, what do I enjoy doing in the business? I think it's. For me, for all of us, it's unique. But for me, it's because of my quite varied background. I've developed competencies in multiple areas that are not typical. But first and foremost, I enjoy business strategy, right? And that's from conceptualization, of a business, such as the case of Eduployment, as well as others, right? So your exercise that you do with Elena of going to a coffee shop and just brainstorming business ideas, man, I love that. I mean, any of my friends say, hey, I want to pick your brains.
How many napkins do you have in your car?
I don't write. No, I'm a terrible note. 16 years in university, my notebooks are 5 pages of notes. I'm a visual thinking. Whatever. But so I genuinely enjoy business strategy and translating that into execution, right? And the making, building something. So that the novelty of coming up with an idea, deciding to execute, to build it. I love building stuff. Never wanted to go into engineering, right? But I love building things. right? And it's whether it's the team, whether it's the tech, whether it's the marketing strategy, whether it's our marketing automation stuff. I love doing that. Whether it's our, standard operating procedures for training new staff in our Subway restaurants, because that comes from, again, for me, it's almost the same, right? Because I'm creating something new, right? When I looked at that and I said, okay, we've got a massive, at the time we had a big issue with turnover of staff. These are entry-level positions, so they churn,
Sure.
a lot of churn, right? So, okay. And then we're going through a period when there were a ton of restaurants opening in Dubai. And so the labor market was drying up, the salaries were increasing, and it wasn't affordable for us, right? So like, how do we do this, right? How do I mitigate that risk that I'm not held hostage to the staff? And I said, you know what? We need to come up with our training standard operating procedures of saying that when I hire staff, they can be fully functional, 50% functional within 2 weeks and fully functional within a month. And that way I can normalize my replacement cost too. I'm not held hostage. I can say, okay, you don't like the salary, you can move on, get a better job. I can hire somebody new and they can take a hit. To me, creating that system was equally as saying, oh, here's a new concept, a new business, right? That's what I love to do. On a day-to-day basis, I spend a lot of my time on the tech for deployment, tech, marketing, and marketing automation. Rana is our chief purpose officer, which also includes being chief operating officer. Okay, and so she deals with the rest of the team in terms of the day-to-day operations of our platform.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like I build it for the team.
Have you experimented in other ways? So sometimes as chief everything officers, I've tried, for example, taking Monday for X activity, Tuesdays for this and that.
Yeah.
Or would you? I mean, it's hard to get a structure to begin with because fires happen. But do you still need some sort of structure, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just flying off from one.
So
fire
I do
to
have
the
structure.
other.
I like structure, and I think you need to, especially if you venture into the parallel entrepreneurship domain, right? Because then, okay, how are you gonna deal with this? So yeah, there is structure. I find it difficult to block the time in days increments, right? So for me, I have
you can't have a marketing day. That would be.
I can't. I'm not even sure my brain will stay focused on marketing for a whole day.
Okay.
Right. I mean, my thinking is in tech terms is multi-threaded parallel system, right? I think in different directions at the same time.
I don't know what that is, but I can imagine it.
I think about different things at the same time.
Okay.
Right. So just like you were saying, your thoughts for today will jump around. My brain jumps around.
We'll get along. We will get along.
Jumps around different things. So I could be literally designing a tech feature in the app, in this 1 second, and the next second I'm thinking about fundraising or something else, right? So no, it doesn't work that way. But I think it's critical for this, especially your kind of different teams, to have the cadence of regular meetings or check-ins or scrums or updates, right? So yeah, my calendar is mapped out that way. I've got my regular calls with the tech teams. I've got my regular calls with the marketing team, that team, and so and then you fill the time around that with everything else that needs to be done. Yeah. Right. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, but
it does, because I do take organization of my time. I have been taking it more seriously in the last 6 months or so. And it's quite challenging because I am a task switcher too. So I can go
multitasker,
I can do it. It doesn't bother me and I don't lose quality. I do find, but then I started taking advice of people that said, like, deep work, you need to do chunks of like 3 hours of just the one thing. Yep. And I wonder why I couldn't do it. And because everyone's like, if you can't do that, then you're having bad quality work. You can't task switch. So I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah,
I'm not crazy.
No, you're not crazy, and I have friends, and I admire that. Okay, I mean, I have friends. Granted, they're kind of at a more advanced stage than all of us in terms of their entrepreneurship journey. They actually block thinking time on their calendar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They have 2 hours a day blocked on their calendar for thinking. I'm like, wow, I'd love to do that. Right? But I'm not sure if I do that.
I do it in theory too. I block 30-minute chunk for daily review. Do I always do it?
Yeah, that's the trap that I've fallen into as I've gotten inspired with different ideas of improving my efficiency, productivity, etc. Is you do it and then it just becomes something on your calendar that you just blow past, right?
Yeah.
When that happens, right, then you're not really doing it. That just generates guilt more than anything else, right?
Thanks,
because you're like,
I'm gonna go delete those entries right now.
That's been my experience, right?
Yeah.
So now I've become quite resistant to saying just putting something on my calendar because if I'm not going to stick to it, because I've realized that my calendar is the most valuable thing for me, right? So it's not on my calendar, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. And we're chatting before about Calendly and all these different tools that make us more efficient. But I also learned from someone else that what shows up on our calendar also is a great indication of where we're placing value. So his famous line, that friend, is, when you say, if I were to ask you, say, what's the most important thing in your life? What's going to be your answer?
Oh, you can't put me on the spot like that.
Family. Everybody says family.
Yeah, sure, family.
Okay. So his comeback, I'll help you out. So his comeback is, show me your calendar. So if you show him your calendar, and nothing on your calendar is family related, then is family really the most important thing?
Yeah.
Are you taking the kids? Are you attending the kids' soccer game? Are you doing that? Whatever it is,
honestly,
right?
one thing that's on my calendar always that I don't skip is football.
But that's personal time. That's not family. If family was the most important thing for
that's
her,
what
right?
I'm saying. So maybe football is more important than family.
But it just depends. It's proportion, but it's there. So it means that it's important to you, right? It's not about quantity necessarily, right?
Yeah.
But if I say the most important thing in my life is my family, and I don't have family dinners or a family vacation or family time or things like that, then it's an indication, right? So look, I think our brains work differently, but also we need to recognize that as entrepreneurs, how our individual personalities are, and how our work style is, might not be the best for our teams as well. So we might have to learn or force ourselves to be more structured for the benefit of the team.
Yeah.
Right. So if the team if let's say your marketing team, your sales team, whatever, if they don't know that once a week at this time they've got to check in with you or they've got to update you on their progress numbers, talk strategies, whatever it is, then what ends up happening, because we all know entrepreneurs that do this, is just whatever randomly pops into their head. They're going to walk out of the office or pick up the phone and call the person, hey, what's happening with that?
That's it.
Blah, blah. So you're being massively disruptive to their work.
Correct.
And then you're going to come back and say, you're not achieving your targets, you're not achieving
your... We've had bosses like that.
We've all have, right? There's that kind of stream of consciousness, random, I'm bored, let me go walk around the office with a cup of coffee and disrupt everybody's work. And say, get that done. And then all of a sudden this becomes a priority and, all this other stuff. So we need, when you're building teams and you're building a business, structure is important. That's why you have departments, or you have different teams, different specialties, different focus.
No, absolutely. What I told you when I joined Alina's business, she was kind of a freelancer turning into an agency. One of the first things we did was take about 6 months to build basically a franchisable version of our business. So we read the book E-Myth Revisited, if you're familiar with that one. E-Myth Revisited. Anyways, helps you standardize all your business practices. And Alina was flying off the seat of her pants, as she should. She's a freelancer. She doesn't need to report to anyone or have. She had one employee at the time, but even that she wasn't there when I joined. So just the two of us, and I was getting instructions from her. I was being onboarded by her, and it was all over the place. And as it should be, because she didn't have to sit and organize. She just had to do the thing. So we spent a whole 6 months coming up with a checklist for every single thing.
You did.
And put it all in Notion, like this software that I use. So created basically my own ERP system, so that when we hire and scale up, people can just plug in and they know exactly on day 1 to day 10 what they're doing. And Alina helped with what needs to go in there. And she has been the greatest, she's shown the greatest commitment to use the system too, even though it was her flying off the seat of her pants that worked for her. But she's adapted to that, because exactly the same thing, that you have to care about how other people work. And what is standard for you is not standard for anyone else. They're here from 9 to 5. You've already given them so many repetitive tasks that they have to do. And then you walk in. So we have a whole system of when tasks get deployed.
A perfect example of the 1 + 1 = 3 for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. But the actual system that we've created for how we run the business is in itself, I think, a product that we can sell. if we needed be, if we ever think down that path. Like that's how tight we wanted to make the inner operations of our business, that any dummy can kind of run it if we give it to their hand.
And more importantly, doing that
Yeah.
sets you on a path of getting it to become an enablement for you to become a parallel entrepreneur.
Investor. Yeah. That's the part of the autopilotizing of the business.
Correct. And that was part of my journey coming out of the corporate world, 20 plus years in the corporate world. I mean, when you work at companies at IBM and companies with, different, thousands of direct reports and many different country operations, you can't run by the seat of your pants.
You can't, yeah.
Right? And that's what I realized.
There's so much to learn from those companies.
Yeah, they're institutions, right? Yeah. I mean, you can go get your MBA, from the top business schools in the world, and that's wonderful and has tremendous value. But if you have the privilege of working of some of these like large Fortune 100, these large corporates, right? They're institutions. They're their own degrees, right? They teach you to think differently. And mind you, I went into, for example, IBM kicking and screaming because up to that point, I had done my own tech startup for 3 years and, that didn't go anywhere and closed it. Then started working for smaller businesses that I've scaled. Other tech startups that I've scaled for people, it wasn't mine. So when the IBM opportunity came, it was literally diametrically opposed to my whole experience. Where I was number two guy. I worked directly with the owner. All the stuff, and then I became a big corporate, 350,000 employees. All of them. What the hell, right?
Yeah.
But man, did I learn?
Yeah.
Okay, you learn how to structure, how to communicate, how do you manage within a matrix, and all this other stuff, right? And so that experience paid off dividends for me, because when we started with our restaurants. From day one, everything was structured because now my brain was genetically incapable of doing anything differently, right? There had to be reporting structures and numbers and, all these different things. So it becomes an enablement, right?
Yeah, we're glad we had corporate experience before we jumped on, because we know a lot of kids that jump into business right after university and they end up having to figure it out too.
And just as a side note, what I've seen with a lot of my entrepreneurial friends, because of obviously you and others, I love entrepreneurs, right? It's my favorite kind of people.
They're nice.
I just love the energy. I love the energy and the thinking. Yeah. But where I've seen like the entrepreneurs that had never worked in the corporate world, who never had a job. Some of them have never had a job. They've come back to a family business, or they got inspired with something right out of university, et cetera. Yeah. Where that becomes a problem is as their business becomes more successful and they're starting to scale to a different level, they really struggle. So when they get to a level, the juncture in that journey of growth of a business where they start putting in C-suite, right? When they start hiring in a C-suite team. Yeah, so it's one thing to have a finance manager and a marketing manager, but now we're talking about I need to hire a CFO, I need to hire a CTO, I need to hire a COO. Those become really, really, really difficult transitions for the entrepreneurs that don't have the corporate experience to draw on in terms of how to structure those teams, how to hire the right people for those kind of positions.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of failed hires, and that, especially when they say, okay, I want to hire a CEO for this business.
Yeah.
I tell them, first one you hire, you're going to fire. Not because they're bad. You don't know how to manage them, right? You're going to learn with the first one how to manage them and what they need to be successful. The second hire will be better, right?
The first one's just collateral damage,
They're just training exercise. They're training exercise.
Training exercise. Oh, keep in mind when you're applying for that CEO. At a new.
Yeah. Am I the first hire for this one? Sorry, I'm not interested.
Have you tried anyone before? Maybe any case studies that you have to show?
It's I think an objectively provable theory. But,
okay. Speaking of, you said you love entrepreneurs, you love the energy.
Yes.
So much so that you've surrounded yourself with these at EO.
Yes.
Just want to touch on that as we're coming close to a closing. The impact that Entrepreneurs Organization has had on your journey. Did your relationship start with EO before eduployment or after?
Before eduployment, sorry. Because eduployment was born at an EO event, yeah.
What are some of the mental models that have shifted for you since you joined EO? Because it's such a unique kind of community that every time I go out to describe it, I have a different phrase to describe it. There's so many things to highlight about it, but one of the things that help people understand what EO is, either through who's in it, the people, and the other is, shifts in thinking.
Yeah.
What would you say? What have been some of the mental model shifts or any light bulb moments that have occurred because of your community at EO?
Look, we have been part of EO for, I think, 8+ years now. The impact has been transformative, and truly in every sense of the word. Very difficult for me to pick out. How do you phrase it? Certain moments, or what was it?
The word transformations.
Yeah, it's very difficult to pick out.
The mental models.
The mental models. Yeah. Sorry. Very difficult. I mean, there has been so many. Okay, that is very difficult to pick out
one
or
each day of
two.
the
But
week.
I will try. I mean, so. I would put it, kind of slightly differently. It's, probably the first and foremost, it's not a mental model. It's actually having almost like a family of people that are like you. I mean, if you think about it in your personal life, what is the bond that you have with your family? There's more similar to you. You're related, right? You share the same genes. Typically, you share the similar upbringing, similar value systems, similar cultures, right? In EO, it's a different family. This is like your business family, right? So is that a mental model shift? No, but it's like almost being placed in an incubator of people that know how to take care of you, and you take care of them because they understand you, right? So that first and foremost, I think, is one of the biggest part. What I mentioned to you earlier about when I pushed you and I said, what if someday never comes? That was a transformative mental model shift for me. That was an EO person that said that to me, another EO member. We were in effectively an EO event. Okay? It was a retreat about thinking about our life and living our life with by design, right? And that was a transformative mental model, and I see it today in a lot of young adults, right? Like we were one day, where we're just going through life reactively, right? You wanted to work in this job, or you want to do this, you get the job offer, you don't, this opportunity comes up, you take it, like I did. I got into entrepreneurship 2.0 because an opportunity came up with the subway, right? It wasn't that I sat back and I said, I want to become an entrepreneur, right? It came up. I mean, a door opens, you walk through that door, and you see where it takes you. Most of us do that. But, getting introduced to the concept of living life by design, or the analogy that I used is saying the way we live our life, if we're not living it intentionally, by design, it would be like getting in the car, opening up Google Maps. What do you plug in as a destination? Where are you going? And unless we sit back and we say, not only where is my destination, that when I'm 60, I want to have a football school in Pakistan for underprivileged kids as one element of that vision, right? But it's also, how am I going to get there? How do I want to live that journey? And not just in my business, but myself. So you're deciding to play football on a regular basis. I play paddle tennis on a regular basis. That's my thing now. Okay. I used to be somewhat of a gym rat at some point, right? How do you want to live your life personally? How do you want to live your family life with your spouse, children, parents, extended family? What does that look like? What do you want that to look like? Your community, your whatever community you are a part of, right? So it's across the various spectrums of your life. So that was a massive, massive, massive mental shift model. And that moment, when I had that moment of being asked, what if someday never comes, changed my life. Because I realized, while the financial struggles, to go back to one of your earlier questions, beginning, the financial struggles continue, okay? And I don't want to say unfortunately or fortunately, because it is what it is, has been for recent years, right? So it's been a long-term struggle. It hasn't been like we had about, it's been a quarter. No, it's been a long-term struggle, right? It's hard to get through those days, and it's hard to, if I hadn't learned that mental model shift, to let life go by on hold because of financial reasons, right? So I'll give you a perfect example, right? One of the things that I had, let's say, on my bucket list or something is to say, I'd love to take the kids and the family and go family vacation, right? And financials were tough, so can't do that, right? But at the time, doing a family vacation meant, going on a ski trip in Switzerland, or, something nice, right? Or Maldives, or, whatever. Then I'm like, okay, but that's on hold, because I can't do it. Financially, I can't pull it off, okay? Having learned that mental shift, what transpired literally a few months after that was Christmas school break. Kids were in university back in Dubai, and I'm dying. I'm like, perfect time to take them on some kind of a holiday. I can't afford the plane tickets. Okay, we ended up going to Hatta for a weekend. At the time, they'd open up these trailers. So this, I forget what they call them now. And because they had just launched, it was like pretty cheap. It was like 200 dirhams a night or something. I mean, it was literally cheap. And you bring your own food, and they have grills and you barbecue, right? Nice. So it was like a picnic in Hatta for a weekend, right? It's probably one of the best family vacations we had. I think it cost me less than 1,000 dirhams. Okay, but more importantly, the kids knew that we couldn't afford to go on a family vacation, right? And again, that's a mental shift on its own, right? Of being transparent, and making sure you don't carry a guilt around that, right? So yeah, that was massive.
Yeah, well,
there's many more, but I mean that's the one that's very close.
There could be one for every day of the week.
It is. It's a massively rich environment, but at the same time, being an EO, as we like to say, it's a gym, not a spa. Okay. What is that? So if you go to a spa, somebody's massaging you, somebody's stretching you. Okay. You go to a gym, you got to lift the weights and get on the treadmill. Yeah. Right? You got to put in the work to get the value. Yeah. So if you chose EO or any other similar type of organization, if you're not going to put in the effort, you're not going to get the value. Right? So if you put in the time and the effort, there are takeaways and value at every interaction. Yeah.
Well, Mazen, there's been mental model shifts for me in the last 2 hours. So
hard to believe we've been talking for 2 hours. It's been enjoyable.
Can you tell? But I've taken so many notes, but at some point I was really feeling this stuff, so I'll have to re-listen to this whole conversation, because I need to uncover some more things. I need to have you back here for round 2 too, because I think we can.
Pleasure. I would love to.
There's a few slaps to my face I could use with some of the things that I don't want to say I'm missing, but like they're being highlighted, or the fire is being stoked a little bit with every statement that we're sharing with each other. But one last question before we wrap up. Yeah. If you were to put something on a billboard, Sheikh Zayed Road, millions of people crossing that every day, and it can't be anything commercial, and it can't be, what if that day doesn't come? What would you put on there? What's your message to people, entrepreneurs, non-entrepreneurs? Well, because you love entrepreneurs, maybe one for them. But What would you put on that billboard on Sheikh Zayed Road?
Wow, that's a tough one. I don't presume that I have a fountain of wisdom to be able to put some kind of wisdom for the masses that way. So I would only be able to answer that by drawing on my own experience, right? And so I would say, understand your values and live your life based on your values with high integrity. I would say that statement defines who I am, how I live my life, how we as a family live our life. And I think it would be able to serve people well, regardless of what walk of life they're in.
I love it. It's literally a 30-minute conversation on the way here. Alina and I in the car, we're talking about the exact same thing.
About values? Yeah. That's a whole conversation.
Or living true values.
I mean, yeah. And I'm not talking about values as in the corporate exercise that you go through, defining vision, mission, values, right?
Life values.
But I mean, that is valuable as well.
Sure.
Okay. Only if the company lives by it, right? But it's your what are your personal values? You know, what are your values as a family? What is it that really matters? Because at the end of the day, that becomes the baseline for making judgments in ambiguous situations that you're facing in life. What's right and what's wrong?
Absolutely.
It's not black and white.
Absolutely.
Right.
It becomes easier to say no to certain things and say yes to the right things. But thank you so much. I know you have to go. I want to keep you here. I know you have a meeting.
Love to come back.
Yeah, would love to have a round two. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Appreciate it.
Loved it.
Really loved the conversation. Thanks for guiding us through it.
Thanks, buddy.
All right. Take care.
All right.